Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I am Hannah Broderud.
And I'm Luke Freeman, and it's just the two of us.
Yeah.
Building castles in the sky for this episode. No Chris. So Hannah and I wanted to share a little bit about polarities.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes what we think are problems and what we are solving as problems are actually polarities. What's a polarity? We're going to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
But why did we choose this to share about?
Well, a couple of reasons. So we just spent a little time with a mentor and teacher, Greg Robinson, and did some facilitator training, some more kind of next level advanced facilitator training for our team, and had some time together. And for me, this was probably it was the biggest new idea that I hadn't really heard articulated in this way that really stuck with me. And I think one of the reasons it resonates is our entire organization is built on a polarity, purpose and performance.
Yeah.
And you have to have both for any organization to be effective. And yet they are opposites. They are a polarity, and you can't do one without the other. And it's hard to do both at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I felt very similar. And as we were talking about, hey, what would be worth sharing with the audience? We know not everyone out there is a facilitator in kind of the technical term, but we do know that a lot of our listeners are leaders and influencers, and they have teams that they lead, teams that they're a part of. And for me, this concept of polarities and really digging into it, I mean, it was the most impactful piece of content that our team spent time learning about and talking about. And I love the example of purpose and performance. Like, and it just underlines, like, we love a great paradox,
Yep.
right? I
do.
love a good paradox. So I'm like, yeah, let's jump into polarities. So if you haven't figured it out, a polarity is essentially a tension that's interdependent.
Mm.
So you know you're in a polarity when there are two situations with two seemingly opposite approaches, but both of those approaches are both necessary and ongoing. It's not like, oh, we've been focusing all on purpose and now we're going to switch. We're going to focus all on performance. That's not how it works. There's an ampersand there for a reason. We have to learn to do both, hold them in tension, and hopefully let them play with each other. And I'll just kind of do a spoiler here, but I'm going to run through some example polarities here. So a part versus a whole. Do we focus on part of our organization or part of our task, or the whole process, the whole organization, the whole task? Short-term planning versus long-term planning. Well, we have to do both. We're going to talk later about directive leadership versus participative leadership. Okay, there's times and places for both. Centralization, decentralization, results versus relationships, accountability and grace, planning and action, doing and being, complexity and simplicity. These are polarities. And oftentimes we treat the symptoms, a challenge that we are facing, like it's a problem to be solved, when in reality, it's a polarity to be managed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And, just to put a little sharper point on the one we mentioned in our first example, purpose and performance, you can also call it the why versus the how.
Yeah.
And the reason that's a polarity is they exist on different systems in our brain. When we're in the middle of the how, the performing, the doing, our brain is occupied in that space, and the why lives in a different order in the hierarchy and brain structure. So when the team and an organization is steeped in the how, we don't have the why front and center. And that's the call to leaders to remind the organization, to remind ourselves of the why. Because when we're in the why, we see the purpose and we're not in the doing. So, and again, to your point, Luke, it's not an either or, it's a both and.
Yeah. Yeah. So shout out to Greg for introducing us to this
Mhm.
concept, but I also want to mention source material here. So this idea of managing polarities comes from a guy named Barry Johnson. Couple different publications. There's a book, Polarity Management, from published in 1996, and then in 2014, Johnson also has another article, and making a difference by leveraging polarity, paradox, or dilemma. So I think there's a couple things that you can dig into if you like this stuff. But we're going to try and make it practical. Paradox is challenging to wrap
Yep.
your head around, but I think there are some technicals here that can help people out. So let me just give you a definition here. And this is from Polarity Management by Johnson. He says polarities are a set of opposites which cannot function well independently and must function together over time to achieve a higher purpose. So let's kind of explore this experientially. So if you're listening, I'll say be careful if you're driving. Do not put yourself in some sort of health crisis. But I want you to choose between two polarities. And one's going to be inhaling and one's going to be exhaling. And we're going to choose two.
Okay.
Okay. So when I say go, you're going to do the one that you chose until I say stop.
All right.
Okay. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. Go. It is it is unsustainable. I inhaled the whole time, and at some point I can't inhale anymore.
I
Right.
exhaled the whole time and I had to gasp for air afterwards.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is an experiential thing, and you can do this with your teams, right? Like a way to experience physically, like if we try and choose a polarity that really exists in companionship with the seeming opposite, like it leads us to something that's not sustainable and not healthy.
Hmm.
Um, so we can actually chart these. If you Google polarity maps, you'll see all sorts of examples of this. But I want to kind of outline here that each side of the polarity, so we're going to use as an example, I'm going to start here with the example of stability and change, right? So, stability and change, two polarities that have to exist together to meet a higher purpose and have to be managed, not necessarily a problem to solve, right? So, let's think about this. So, when do people try and solve a stability and change polarity as a problem?
Mm.
We have a competitor coming into our market. They're doing something differently. Oh my gosh, we have to change. We have to change everything or we're not going to survive. It's a problem that we've done the same thing the same way for 5 years, right? Well, that's not quite true,
Mm.
right? What is it that we're doing now that we should be able to continue in a stable way to help us be reliable, efficient, keep the trust that we already have with customers, right? And what do we have to change? Because with change, like we do need to adapt, we need to innovate. There are things there, but we can't move from a 100% stable organization, say, oh, that's our problem. We're going to move to a 100% change organization. It, there are areas in the organization that need to be stable, areas that need to change. And really, every area is probably going to have elements of stability and change. So let's kind of use this as an example. So each of these polarities has both a value and what Johnson calls a shadow side. So for this first example of stability and change, let's talk about the value of stability. What comes to mind for you, Hannah?
Um, Definitely stability is important because it's what allows you to generate and sustain some kind of momentum. If there's constant interruption and change, momentum gets interrupted.
Yeah.
So I would say a value of stability is the ability for momentum to build and continue.
Yeah. And I would say the biggest one that comes to mind for me is efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Like stable things that we've iterated slowly over time are
Mm-hmm.
efficient. People know their roles, people know the processes, we have tools established. There's some level of efficiency that new, innovative, changing landscapes, like they're just not efficient
Mm-hmm.
typically,
Mm-hmm.
right off the bat. So that's value, real value to stability. Now, not only does that polarity of stability have value, it also has this shadow side. So, the shadow side of stability, what comes to mind for you?
I mean, stagnation, I think, is the ultimate boredom, rigidity. There's a number of things that come to mind. And as someone who I think inherently tends towards change, and I'm someone who loves routine and sameness.
Mhm.
Um, I can often be prone to feeling that if things are stable, it's a little boring.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I agree. I mean, that word stagnation is like very visceral to me.
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
want that. I don't want to
Mhm.
be a part of teams that feel stagnant. But another one to me is like rigidity.
Yeah.
Like it's taboo to change,
Mm.
right? And whenever we get into the shadow side of stability, like it feels very constraining. It feels super boring. It feels like you're working kind of in molasses, like, "Oh, I can't even try anything different."
Yeah. If I were to give a phrase that exemplifies to me the shadow side of stabilities, it's what we've always done. We've always done it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you continue to do something for the sake of it's how we've always done it.
Mhm. I remember being told a lot of times, "You need to learn to be patient."
Mm.
And I was just like, "Why? I have to be patient because
Mhm.
you are not willing to change."
Uh-huh.
Like, you're basically saying, when you tell me you have to learn to be patient, what you're really saying is, "Don't make me be uncomfortable."
Yeah.
Like, I want to be comfortable here, so why don't you just be uncomfortable? And so, what Johnson would say is that because we live in a world of entropy, where
Mhm.
things decline and degrade over time, that the healthy, the value attributes of stability over time, our organizations will drift down into the shadow side
Yeah.
and have to go into times of renewal. So that moves us over to the value side of change. So, value of change, innovation, adaptability, relevance, a higher level of energies, um, dealing with more unknowns. I mean, we've all been a part of change organizations as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm. Yeah. And likewise, change has a shadow side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think and to use a different word here, but we talk about transformation a lot,
Uh huh.
and I've seen a couple counterpoints lately as transformation has become almost this overused concept,
Yeah.
right? Where people are coming back and challenging, well, should we always be transforming? Meaning, should we always be changing? And I think because the shadow side to a lot of change or constant transformation
Hmm.
is, chaos, fatigue. We talked for a while, disruption was the big buzzword, right? We
Yeah.
need disruptors. We need to disrupt this industry or this company or this mindset.
Hmm.
Well, with disruption comes loss of momentum. It's
Hmm.
start and stop. Things get chaotic for a while and inefficient.
Yeah. Yeah. And just this idea of change fatigue, I'm
Mhm.
thinking about all of us winter of 2020, 2021,
Hmm.
like all the change that most organizations and most individuals and families went through during COVID. It was just a real time of change fatigue.
Yeah.
Like, we all went virtual. Oh, we have to, I remember back when we were using bleach wipes to wipe off our mail because no one knew anything, right? Like, are we going to get COVID and die because the
Someone touched the
mailman
mail.
touched, was sick? I don't know, but you just didn't know anything.
Yeah.
And it was really tiring and took a ton of energy.
Hmm.
And, with this idea of entropy, right, and drifting toward the shadow side, things that only live in change, will move over time into that change fatigue space and then naturally need to go into a time of the value side of stability.
Yeah.
And so you kind of see this figure eight cycle, I'm
Hmm.
imagining value on the top,
Hmm.
shadow sides on the bottom,
Hmm.
stability next to change. We start at the value of stability, and then we go to the shadow side and it feels rigid and uncomfortable, and maybe we haven't been adaptable enough. And so it's like, oh, shoot, we got to change. We jump to the good stuff about change. And then over time, our people are like, it's exhausting working here. And we're like, oh, we got to create some stability. And we go back up to the top of the other side and just the cycle continues. But I think that's the point here,
Yeah.
right? Is that we are doomed to that being a cycle
Hmm.
if we don't recognize that it's a polarity to be
Hmm.
managed.
Hmm.
If we look at, wow, we are too rigid, like we see the shadow side
Hmm.
of stability, it was like, that's where we are right now. That is a problem to be solved. We have to change.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, 2 years later, 5 years later, we've been in change so long. That's a problem. Man, our culture's broken,
Yeah.
right? We have
Everything
to
is always
change this. It's always
changing.
changing. We
We
got to
got no
move to
momentum.
stability. That's a problem. We got to solve that problem. Well, then you end up back where you were. So
Mhm.
it's a different game though when we can do something like, hey team,
Mhm.
look at this polarity. I'm going to put this up on the board.
Mhm.
Where do you think we're at right now? Like, what valuable things about stability, what valuable things about change are we experiencing? What parts of the shadow side of change and stability are we experiencing? And what do we need to do to manage this right now in the
Yeah.
next 90 days?
Yeah.
All right. What would make this feel more appropriate and in balance?
Mhm.
That's a much different conversation
Mhm.
than we're too rigid. We have to fix that problem.
Yeah.
Right. It's managing the polarity.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
A couple thoughts that come to mind. You mentioned the figure eight symbol, which really also is an infinity symbol, right? When you put it on its side.
Hmm.
And I do think it's helpful to recognize that at any point in time, we are somewhere along that. It is an infinity loop. Like
Yeah.
for the entirety of your life, you will be inhaling and exhaling.
Yeah.
And for the entirety of an organization's life, we will be managing the polarity between stability and change. And if we recognize that that is an infinite loop and that we are finding ourselves in different points of that figure, that loop, it's okay because we recognize that that is part of just the existence.
Yeah.
It's not about finding a way to stay in either one. Like that's a losing battle.
Yeah.
And I think if we can recognize, to your point, like what point in that do we find ourselves on? I
Hmm.
also think that there are some team dynamics and personality traits that lean towards one or the other.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
understanding the people in your organization and where they tend to gravitate and then create that healthy tension and productive conflict between the tradition bearers who hold to tradition and stability,
Hmm.
who maybe their default mode is to only see the upside of what is
Yeah.
and the downsides of change.
Hmm.
That's on the one pole,
Yeah.
right? On the other opposite pole, you have the crusaders. Those are those who only see the downside of what
Mhm.
is and the upside of change.
Yeah.
And so
Guilty.
even yeah, right? And I think most of us on our team tend to be there, which means also we're we're okay with change, and we need a reminder of like how do we create more stability,
Yeah.
because we don't have as many tradition bearers on the team. But
Yeah.
that means also we get to, as leaders, say, okay, who are the people in this organization that can help remind us of what we don't want to lose?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love how this points us back to rather than right or wrong, like,
Hmm.
oh, it's a what is right now,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Not because I'm very tempted as that crusader to be like,
Hmm.
oh, stability, what a bunch of losers, you know, but that's not true,
Right, it's
right?
not.
It's true that there's value on both ends of this polarity. And
Hmm.
actually, it becomes a responsibility of mine as a leader to be able to get out of my crusaderness and
Hmm.
say, what do we as a team need right now? Like, how do we manage this polarity right now?
Hmm.
We got change in spades over here. How do we make sure that we have some measure of balancing stability so that we don't all, work ourselves to
Yeah.
death or, end up in some unforeseen consequence or whatever it is?
And that kind of, brings us to another maybe similar related polarity is the polarity of individual versus team,
Yeah.
right? To break it down similarly, the value in seeing and valuing the individual is that we all have autonomy, there's room for creativity. We get to, and at least in our organization, we've chosen to set ourselves up so that everybody has some choice in what they contribute, how much they contribute,
Mhm.
like in what capacity they contribute,
Yeah.
right? So we honor the individual and that autonomy. And then on the flip side, right, the shadow side of focusing only on the individual would be that we might end up with silos, where maybe ego might get in the way or feathers might get ruffled if people don't get the thing that they want,
Mhm.
or if everybody chooses not to participate in doing the quote unquote boring tasks
Mhm.
that maybe we struggle with, then we have some gaps,
Yeah.
right? When we don't think about the greater good and what's good for the whole.
Yeah. Well, and I love this because, like you said, our team deals with this a lot. But to me, the biggest value of kind of this individual side of the polarity is just the idea of personal responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? If
Mm-hmm.
I was a lone gun out there on my own, there's a lot of personal responsibility for me to like do things well or not do things
Yep.
well, get stuff done or not get stuff
Yep.
done. And I think for our team, that's a real strength is that there's a lot of personal responsibility for
Mm-hmm.
the work that we do with clients, the relationships that we value and are managing, and even how we show up with the team. There's a
Yep.
lot of like, no one's like, well, that was someone else's job, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, but there, like you said, there are challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that's my existence, 90% of my time, I'm out there doing my own thing, working with the client projects I'm on. Well, it's really easy for me to think about how that's working for me and think less about well, what do I need to adjust in what I'm doing for the good of the collective, for the good of the
Mm-hmm.
team.
Yeah. And then, yeah. So what are the upsides of focusing on team, Luke?
Yeah. I mean, to me, like when we focus on team, we talk a lot about our shared purpose. We talk a lot
Mhm.
about leveraging each other's strengths.
Mhm.
We talk a lot about how are we better together, right? Then, it's kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of acknowledgement of that and gratitude for that, that maybe we don't think about when we're just out there on our own doing
Yeah.
our thing.
And I will just speak from personal experience, right? Having experienced both sides of that, starting my business and consulting practice as a solo practitioner, then choosing to be part of this team where, I feel like I get the best of both worlds because I get to have autonomy and choice,
Hmm.
and I also get the benefits of a team and that collaboration. It's been like my preference,
Yeah.
right? But now I get to be part of a team where we also are aware of like that individual contribution and autonomy that's important. But then to kind of just to show the contrast, right, of the shadow side, if we focus too much on team and
Hmm.
forget about the individual, that's when any team can get into groupthink, too much sameness,
Yeah.
right? Where we um, don't have as much new ideas. And that's
Hmm.
definitely a thing that can lead to stagnation as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think about even entitlement, right?
Mm.
When that goes really far and it's all
Hmm.
about the team, I think people start to think, well, this team has rules that can never change.
Mm.
And so I'm always going to get this, or we're
Yeah.
always going to do it this way.
Yeah.
And when there's a focus on the individual, I think there's a lot of freedom to
Hmm.
say, well, I'm going to do it my way,
Hmm.
right? I'm going to try something new and different. So, yeah, again, like infinity loop
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
right? It really requires both.
Yeah. And the whole responsibility thing dynamic within team versus
Hmm.
individual, right? You already talked about if you're as an individual, it's very obvious and you it's your choice if you take responsibility, but the consequences are all on you if you
Yeah.
drop the ball on something.
Yeah.
And in a team, there's some diffusion of responsibility. There can be, right? The
Hmm.
shadow side of that, because it's like, well, someone else could do it. And either we wait or assume that someone else is going to pick up that ball
Yeah.
and then it gets dropped because everybody made the same assumption.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a really interesting conversation when our team was meeting for kind of our annual strategic planning around one on ones.
Hmm.
And that's been kind of an ongoing challenge for me, I think individually. And I don't know
Hmm.
if you've experienced this too, but for me, it's been a challenge feeling a responsibility to the team around like, oh gosh, I need to schedule one on ones with everyone. We talk to all of our clients about doing one on
Hmm.
ones, but then I get super busy and I'll miss one, or I'll be like, gosh, I haven't even had kind of a one on one conversation with so and so for like 6 or 8 weeks. That's too long. And we had this really, to me, it was freeing conversation where it was like, hey, if you want a one on one, be responsible for scheduling it.
Yep.
Because, and then I was like, well, of course, because I will never, if someone's like, hey, Luke, can I meet with you? I will never say no,
Right.
ever.
No.
Right. I
No.
will always make time and
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
It's just the proactivity of it, I
Hmm.
get challenged with because I have so many plates that I'm spinning.
Hmm.
And so I was like, that is such an amazing example of managing this polarity of like, is there care? Is there an agreed upon value that we get one-on-one development time? And how's it going? And are you meeting your career goals here? And all the things, right?
Hmm.
Yes, you are entitled to that as a part of this team. And I don't like the entitlement word, but I I don't think it's that wrong. Like people on the purpose and performance group team, like it is their right. They
Yeah.
are going to get that
Yeah.
if they want it and ask for it.
Hmm.
And that polarity there of adding the personal responsibility piece in was just so refreshing to me.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. So, okay, that's just, we ran through a couple examples here. Um, I think let's take a minute and like, I read through some of these before. I'll do it again just because maybe people are going to understand it better now that we've talked through it. But other examples of polarities, the part versus the whole, right?
Hmm.
What's the health of the team versus the health of the organization? What's the health of that individual product versus our entire product set, right? Short term thinking, planning, risk management versus long term, directive versus participative leadership, accountability versus grace, Results, relationships, which is very connected to the accountability and grace one.
Mm-hmm.
Centralization and decentralization, that can be around decision making. It can be around process. It can be around how specialized are the roles that we do versus are we generalists? There can be a lot of conversations there. Planning versus action,
Mm-hmm.
right? Lots of teams are like, oh man, they'll talk forever, but do they actually get anything done? And some of them, all they do is get stuff done, but they're probably not doing the right things because they never spend any time in planning,
Yeah.
right? Consistency and flexibility, thinking, feeling, and these apply to ourselves as individuals too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Doing versus being. That's kind of the individual version of planning and action,
Mm-hmm.
right? Complexity versus simplicity, right? It is true sometimes that a simple answer is mostly right,
Yeah.
but the details matter,
Uh-huh.
right? I think about this with marketing and messaging to markets all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
right? We have to be able to simplify what we do, and man, the details and executing on those details really matter.
Mm-hmm.
So those are a few examples. Let's just pick one each.
Mm-hmm.
Which of those is something that you as an individual, maybe you have to keep coming back to and you find yourself trying to, to solve a problem when you really should be managing the polarity?
Yeah, I think for me, one that has been a reoccurring one throughout my life, and I guess all of these have because they all exist on infinity loops, but the thinking versus feeling. And the more I've studied the brain and learning about the brain, right? We talk about some people as feelers and some as thinkers. Well, that's nonsense because we're all thinking and feeling
Hmm.
um, usually at the same time, but our awareness tends to be on one or the other.
Yeah.
And the brain is always processing emotional and cognitive information.
Hmm.
And that's, I mean, because emotion is information too.
Hmm.
And the thinking part of the brain processes information.
Hmm.
And so, I remember earlier in my like my younger self, I tended to identify more with the thinking part of my brain, and I was more in that consciously aware of that part,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't always have conscious awareness of what I was feeling and how
Hmm.
those feelings were impacting my behavior,
Yeah.
right? Others come at it from the opposite, where they're always very aware of the feelings.
Hmm.
But I felt like I had to think my way to my feelings,
Yeah.
right? So that's like for me personally, that the value of thinking is logic, objectivity, intentionality, because
Yeah.
you're consciously choosing your responses. Um, but if you only live there, the shadow side can be detachment or this inability to really connect with people in a meaningful way
Yeah.
because we connect empathetically. We connect with other humans, not by thinking, but by feeling and
Hmm.
relating to feeling and emotion.
Yeah.
So things like empathy and intuition are are really important differentiators for humans and how
Hmm.
we relate to others, and especially for leaders, how we influence and how we, you know, notice and choose and act in an intentional way. But the shadow side of feeling and even shadow side of empathy is if we over identify with the emotion and get dragged into it or participate in an escalation
Yeah.
um, or maybe a bias based on subjective feeling.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that resonates with me so much. I am such a thinker.
Hmm.
Like, it's the default.
Hmm.
And it's taken a lot of work to say, how do I, and this is a thinker's way to think about this.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
But like, wow, how do I leverage all those feelings to be able to think better? And I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but
Hmm.
yeah, like what a way to supercharge your decision making, like by tapping into the other side of the polarity.
Yeah.
and regardless of what side you
Mm-hmm.
kind of naturally find yourself on.
Mm-hmm. I like to ask people, and this is how I know if they're a feeler or a thinker. I'll ask, how do you feel about that? And the thinkers will tell me all their thoughts about it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, but if you're truly
I
talking
feel
to,
like it's a bad idea
yeah,
because da 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 da.
exactly. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the feelers will give you emotion words,
Uh-huh.
not logic words.
Yeah. Well, I have to think about that before I knew what the feeling words would
Exactly.
be. Well, for me, the one that jumps out is this directive versus participative leadership. And I
Mm,
think it's because through experience and whatever, whatever makes me me, I have some strong feelings,
mhm,
ironically,
mhm,
about directive leadership, and definitely had some experiences as kind of a young professional around the shadow side of directive leadership and kind of assigning all directive leadership in the bad bucket, right? Only seeing the shadow side of it, seeing like the control, like the disengagement that it led to in people, the coercion that existed there, the lack of like developing people and helping them think for themselves. And so I really relied on participative leadership style for, I mean, I don't know. We won't put years on it. I mean, still
mhm,
today, right? It's
mhm.
it's the go-to. It's what
Yep,
I rely on.
yep.
And I had a lot of success with it too. I think that's the other thing. Like my
Mhm,
first 10 years, people loved me as their boss.
mhm,
Like they were just like, "Oh my gosh, you should try and work for Luke. He's great." Da, 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 And I was just like, "Yeah, I've got this thing figured out."
hmm,
Um, what I didn't realize was there are times that I was being super inefficient
yep,
because of an unwillingness to take a directive approach.
mhm,
And there were people who I was not giving them what they needed
mhm,
because I was unwilling to or unskilled at taking a directive approach. Because, participative leadership does have this shadow of like decisions being slow, having systems with a lot of ambiguity in them. Like, now, what are
mhm,
we supposed to be doing? And
mhm.
what am I supposed to be doing? Can I make this decision? Can I not? And for me, I'm just like, I love the ambiguity.
Yeah,
Like, bring it on,
yeah,
right? But that's not what helps people
right.
oftentimes grow, move through their professional development and careers. So I have really had to work on taking a more directive approach when appropriate,
Mhm,
um, identifying times where clarity is needed, identifying times where the speed matters. And I find myself in meetings now kind of questioning it when I'm letting things go
mhm,
too long,
mhm.
because oftentimes I know the answer,
Yeah,
right? I don't think my answer is always the right answer, but I'll have a strong feeling about a decision that should be made.
mhm,
But I might let the conversation go 10, 15 minutes to kind of let people get their say, understand the issues, whatever else. But I have found myself lately getting better at saying, okay, Luke, everyone's talked about this for 10 minutes. Are you ready to just make the decision?
mhm.
Is it okay to just make the decision? What's the risk in just making the decision? But I think that's growth for
Yeah,
me, right? And
yeah,
I have a lot of room to grow in this.
mhm,
But for me, learning about polarities rather than that being a problem to solve, it's not, Luke, you need to learn to be a more directive leader.
mhm,
And it's a problem that you're naturally a participative leader.
mhm,
It is a, Luke, you need to learn to balance directiveness and participativeness and understand when, you need the salt and pepper spice
mhm.
of directiveness a little bit more in your recipe,
Yeah,
right? And when it's like, ooh, a little too spicy, you need to back it off a little bit. So that's been very helpful
yeah,
for me.
yeah. And not to throw out one more here, because I know you said one, but one that's similar to that. And I think that we as a team experience, and one that we explored a lot in our time together this week, was this idea of accountability and grace,
Yeah.
also a polarity, right? And
Mhm.
because we tend to be people who value participatory leadership, and we also have a lot of personal responsibility,
Mhm.
autonomy, and personal accountability, um, but grace for the team and value participation and collaboration, we sometimes struggle with accountability as a team,
Yeah.
right? Team accountability versus like grace is much easier for us on our
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
So, and that doesn't mean that each of us individually are accountable people. And I strongly believe that there can be no team accountability without personal accountability,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it starts with the self, it starts choosing to be accountable.
Mhm.
But when you apply that individualistic accountability with a lot of grace in a team setting,
Mhm.
how do you create a system of accountability where there is built in accountability to whether it's results or timelines or internal projects or internal metrics that we want to track,
Yeah.
right? How do we create that? And again, that was the aha for me this week was okay, it's not one or the other.
Mhm.
It's both and we can create because we are accountable individuals who give grace, we can also manage that polarity of
Yeah.
creating team accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to make this practical here in the last few minutes. So, one, if you're listening, I think just reflecting on what is something that I'm viewing as a problem, a deficit, a issue that might actually not be a problem to be solved, but be a polarity that needs to be managed.
Mm.
Um, I think spending some time on that, looking through that, thinking about that would be great. If you want to chat through some of these, reach out to us. The other thing is like, okay, say you identify that. What do you
Mhm.
do? Like,
Mhm.
how do you manage the polarities? And I mentioned this earlier, but I would just say, talk about it,
Yeah.
right? Bring that to the team, bring that to the organization, bring it
Mhm.
to your spouse or partner, and just say, hey, I've been thinking about this problem to solve. It's been on my mind. I'm wondering if I could think about it differently, or we as a team
Mhm.
can think about this differently. How would we manage both of these well?
Yeah.
Do we feel like we're on one side of the polarity more than we need to be?
Yeah.
And so I would just talk about it, right?
Right.
Throw it up on a slide. How are we doing as a team?
Yeah.
Where are we out of balance?
Mhm.
And have the conversation with the team. If that's
Mhm.
something that you're like, oh, I can't do that, I need help with that, reach out to us. We
Yeah.
can help you have that conversation with your team.
Mhm.
When you think about applying this, Hannah, like what do you think are some practical ways that organizations could increase their performance with this
Yeah.
tool?
I mean, because you said performance, flashback to how we opened this, right? Purpose and performance, like anchor to the why,
Yeah.
anchor to the purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and then manage the performance and recognize again, these are two sides of the coin. They are different, but both necessary.
Mm-hmm.
They are not, if you find yourself and maybe to illustrate, I'll kind of share my closing thoughts. This other n- polarity, tension, or paradox that has recently been made famous by Brene Brown, right?
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is poetry and plumbing.
Yeah.
And and I got to see my two friends, Luke and Chris, give this keynote at the Nahara conference where you really made that very practical of what that means in leadership. So how do we stay focused on performance? We have to have both of those two things. Leaders have to have a vision that is poetic enough that people want to follow and get inspired to do the work
Mm-hmm.
so that they choose to engage and contribute value and feel valued and significant. And then you also have to do the plumbing, which
Yeah.
is getting the work done and creating the infrastructure and the a structure that informs the right behavior that you
Mhm.
want to have in the organization. So I think for me, those are kind of is a good way for me to wrap this up and sum it up, right? Like poetry versus plumbing, it's not a problem to be solved, one or the other.
Yeah.
It's a polarity to be managed.
Yeah. And I think my takeaway here is that if you are experiencing just some sort of repeated cycle of reform that is just creates fatigue,
Mhm,
you know,
mhm,
it's like, I can't believe we're talking about this again.
mhm.
I can't believe that we haven't figured out how to solve this problem.
Yeah.
I can't believe that so and so has not gotten with the program, right? These types of things that are repeated often are a symptom that we've only tried to solve problems and not really looked at both sides of the polarity coin. So I would just, that's my takeaway. I want to look in my life for areas that have felt like that, and felt like repeated problems to solve, and apply this to that. So I think that's as good a place as any to wrap up.
Right. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, a good one. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can connect with us, find articles, some free resources at purposeandperformancegroup.com. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn or other social media platforms. Magic in the Room is produced by Ethan Babylon. Our theme music is by Evan Grimm. You can find his music on Apple Music. And please check us out on YouTube as well. You can both listen, but also look at our shining, smiling faces while you do so. So until next time, thanks so much. Have a purposeful leadership life.